the scope of works that staff have just received from a provider is broken down into works needed to further improve the model and works needed to develop a comprehensive communication package. That would include increased advice. It includes the necessary education and improved engagement. These are all things that if with your endorsement, we'll be putting in play over the next couple of weeks with a view that we will be communicating more extensively through to 1st of November 27, so that we're ready to go. Your second question regarding, and I'll use Melbourne as the example, with the committee's endorsement, we would like to investigate more thoroughly Melbourne's experience. Their reporting in the proposed manner is now quite mature. What was their experience moving from monitoring to modelling? What were the costs? What was the public response as they moved through the various stages? Are all things that we need to investigate.
Thanks. Okay. Member Brown.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. Reminded of a saying, e paru ia, e paru au. Basically means, if that's sick, so am I. And I absolutely acknowledge some disclosures, if not admissions, from members in terms of failures, and being a member here, I'd actually subscribe to that, because what it needs is leadership. And if the water bodies and catchments are broken down and not treated as a whole, then the outcome will be the same. It won't be a whole outcome. So from the outset, I've got possibly an omnibus of a couple of questions. Under manaakitanga, our duty of care, responsibilities to each other, there's an element that misses all the time, and that's the biota within it. And so we're on the same page about any initiative to advance and improve our kaitiakitanga in these domains, our stewardship responsibilities. So, Councillor Newman raised a point that I'm thinking about, because with respect to the model, and I've read the Jenkins report, it just feels like, even though it's going to be proactive, I accept that, but it's nothing other than a warning shot. And maybe not today, Madam Chair, but my first question is, what else, other than the resolutions before us, can we do as leaders of this community, in your opinion, whilst we wait for you to come back in November?
So I understand the intent of that question, Member Brown. We could now spend the next few hours discussing where to from here. I'm going to, from a chair's perspective, bring this back to the point, which is, do we endorse this next step for Safe Swim or not? We've got two things. We've got the workshop that's coming up that the Mayor will be chairing with water care, and I think that's a good chance to raise some of these issues. And I'm going to recommend and work with the staff and the Deputy Chair on a comprehensive report that gives us a chance to talk about the where to from here. We touch on it during the report, but it's not, and we don't have the time today to go through the very critical issue that you raise. We simply have to acknowledge we've got a huge problem with water quality in the Auckland region. What are we going to do? And I'd like to see us take the time to dignify that with enough time to answer it properly.
Apologies, Madam Chair, I was unaware of the workshops. That aside, you've made a comment in terms of focus on the development areas, and I know the models whereby you have sampling instruments in areas that aren't so populated. So the effect within the environment is largely the same, they're just in different locations, and I can attest to that because NIWA have just begun a fine sediment study to the Wairoa, the Tūranga and the Tāmaki Strait with our iwi. Can I just suggest that that figure there is disturbing for me insofar as the research we're doing right now is a far greater value than that, and we're talking about probably less than 2% of this water body. And so I absolutely support Councillor Lee's question about what do we get for 325,000. Now, you made a comment about Melbourne, and I will always take issues to these so-called international standards, because the reality with Melbourne is I'd be very delighted within your exchange with them that they have an Aboriginal element to their modelling and their experience. So, thank you, Madam Chair. I've said enough.
Okay, no, points understood. Thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. Couple of quick questions. I understand that we're effectively moving away from monitoring to forecasting. What actual data collection are we going to do to validate? That is, are we going to do some testing, and if so, how much? Because models are fine, but if they're not validated and people don't have some confidence, we've got a major problem.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chairman. Yes, there will be monitoring required from time to time to validate the model and make sure that the model is representing reality as close as possible. That's the nature of all models. They do have an OPEX component associated with them. Having developed a model, it's a live asset, and it does require looking after, no different to any other asset, to keep it viable and doing its job.
Okay, well, I guess from my perspective, and I think the general public, that quite like to know what that is. I'll just let that rest. The other question I've got is just around the budget for Safe Swim. Is the budget going to remain the same, or are we looking at a reduction in the budget as a consequence of what we're doing here? And I'm talking about Safe Swim.
So the monies that are for procuring the helicopter and the laboratory expenditure is no longer required if the committee endorses the recommendation in front of you. But also the committee can see that the endorsement requires investment in the model itself. What I'd add is that helicopter and that laboratory spend is every year. These are monies that is no longer required to be expensed, and we could redivert that investment into healthy waterways, for instance, in manners like further validating and improving the model over time.
So my question is around the budget for Safe Swim. So are we looking at a cut in the budget for Safe Swim generally, irrespective of how you parcel the money up into monitoring or validation or whatever?
No, Councillor Walker. The monies that go to the helicopter and the laboratory would be spent via Healthy Waters on the model investment, improving signage, maintaining the web service, the app. There's other more pressing areas for the money than the helicopter and the laboratory.
Okay. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Of the 81 locations, is the Otara Lake and Creek, is that part of the monitoring?
Otara Lake is not included in the Safe Swim program, but from my recollection is part of the state environment monitoring.
Yeah. No, it's just that I know over 40 years ago it used to be a place that people, used to be able to swim, but, and just for some of those sitting around the table, they may not realise, but back in 1994, the former Electricity Corporation of New Zealand and Manukau Council, the Auckland Regional Council, the electricity company was supposed to do some work on the Otara Lake, and that hasn't happened. So,
Just on that Otara Lake, we do have a program with the local board at the moment looking at what we can do to improve the quality of that waterway, which is a very collaborative program with both the local board and a number of interested community groups as well.
because it flows into Clevedon and Highbrook and Botany, and so it's very significant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. I'm sure it'll come up in the annual plan discussion as it does. I've got Councillor Simpson and then Councillor Cashmore with the last two questions, then we'll need to move to the recommendations. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, it's a bit of a leading question because I noticed that E has been altered to the Independent Māori Statutory Board, and when it wasn't altered and it was just to local boards for their information. My question to you is, why do you want to tell, and it's a leading question, why do you want to tell the local boards? Why do you want to have, no, I'm actually getting to a point, so, you know. Why do you want this report and resolutions to be sent to the local boards?
Through you, Madam Chair, in my experience, this is a matter of particular interest to many local boards, and I'm looking forward to engaging with them in depth in the issues and what myself and my colleague are looking to do to address them.
It was a leading question because I was going to suggest that we add to that recommendation by saying for their awareness and, for their awareness, for their information and assistance with awareness, because I think it's, you know, they are our community, and rather than just say, here's a report FYI, it would be nice to add some more governance context around that and say, look, we want their feedback, we want them to help promote this. I think what you've done is fantastic. I'm really happy to second it. But I just think, you know, rather than just be a bit of a token gesture, whether you would consider the recommendation that potentially we add to that. But then we've got the Independent Māori Statutory Board, and I'm not sure how that would balance, whether we should separate them out or I'd be looking to Mr Wilcox, etc., for their info, because it's maybe a slightly different.
Can we not support
Maybe?
that with all the local board recommendations? Everything you want in
I think, so let's, I mean, we can now go off on another tangent on this one. My sense is that that's absolutely fine. I think the wording, Councillor Simpson, when we forward the resolutions to local boards, it's for local boards to discuss this, to make the decisions that they wish to make, and if they wish to offer assistance and advice, that's up to them. It's taken as a
But that's my point, though. You know, this is a fantastic initiative in moving digital. We want them to promote it, don't we? And just by saying here's an FYI, I think it would be proactive to take it further and say
let's just say yes and do it. That's great. Councillor Cashmore.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. The question was actually answered by Councillor Walker, and that was very adequately answered by Mr McElroy, and that was about public assurance of the program, because it is predictive and therefore it needs to be accurate, and great answer that. So thank you, Madam Chair.
And to reassure people, monitoring will continue because that's the way that the model's actually validated.
Yep.
I think we've just missed that in some of the discussion. Right, so it's been moved and seconded. If people wish to speak to the recommendation, Councillor Lee, you'd signalled you wanted to.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This touches on a very critical issue which we will have to face over the next 3 years and onwards. It's not a new issue. It's been around for many, many years, but all of us over that time have been reassured that the problem was being sorted. And the fact of the matter is that it hasn't. And it'll be a long time before it is sorted. I have no problems with this program. It's common sense to use a predictive model rather than week by week monitoring. The reason being is that the monitoring program was almost predicated on aberrant events. Something has happened, you better go and check it. What is happening to our harbour is routine. It's constant. We know that. At Watercare stated in its application for the resource consent for the central interceptor, 2.2 million cubic metres of diluted sewage goes into the harbour every year. That's a huge figure. Now, I have to say, in regard to this program, while being supportive of it, I would be concerned if it's being used as a PR tool to divert the public away or reassure them again about the underlying problem, because this doesn't touch the underlying problem. And it's easy when you are presenting a program to having to sell its benefits. There is a risk of overstating, and I make that point. I have to say, even the use of the word healthy waters has a certain element of irony, because this is not about healthy waters, this is to warn folks about unhealthy waters. And so, you know, I'd bear in mind the lessons of George Orwell in the way we communicate with the public, just like we are aware or have a growing awareness of how serious this problem is. And you don't need to be given a whole lot of stuff about healthy waters. They know that it's a flip. The concern is unhealthy waters. And sad to say, with the present policy settings, that the health risks will increase.